In the fantasy land of Oriole, a party of 4 adventurers are returning to the royal capital after finally defeating the demon king that plagued the land. The party, led by the human hero Himmel, includes the priest Heiter, the dwarven warrior Eisen, and the elf mage Frieren. After 10 years of struggle, their journey has come to an end and the kingdom celebrates their victory over the demon king. The night of the celebration, the party drinks together and talks about their adventures together, such as almost getting arrested by the king on their first day, Heiter's constant hangovers, and Frieren getting caught in a mimic trap. As they talk, the Era meteor shower starts, a cosmic phenomenon that only happens every 50 years. As an elf, Frieren is almost immortal, so she tells them that she will take them to a better place to see the meteors, at the next meteor shower 50 years from now. The next day, Frieren formally decides to leave the party to continue her quest to collect magical spells. Her companions wish her luck, but recognize that as an elf the decade traveling with Frieren probably did not seem so long for her. In the intervening years, Frieren continues her travels around the world, exploring many lands to find new spells and encountering various lands and challenges. One day she is attempting to buy a demon horn, but is unable to find one. She remembers that the party had looted one from the demon king years ago, so she decides to return to the capital to fetch it. But when she returns to the city, she sees that the city has changed a lot. She also finds a much older Himmel, since it has been almost 50 years since she last visited. Himmel compliments Frieren, who looks largely the same. At his house, Himmel reveals that the demon horn had a terrible aura around it, and it may have affected his health, but since it was a gift from her, he always treasured it and never threw it away. Frieren recovers the horn, but is surprised that Himmel kept it all these years. She later finds the statues built by the king to celebrate their party, before she and Himmel go see the rest of the party to see the meteor shower again. Heiter the priest also has aged greatly, and although Eisen looks the same, he tells her that he also has aged in his own way. Frieren travels with the party again, and unintentionally helps the rest of the party experience again some of their youthful memories of adventuring. Eventually they make it to Frieren's treasured location to see the Era meteor shower again, and Himmel thanks Frieren for this last adventure. Soon, Himmel passes away of old age, and although Frieren attends the funeral, some of the townspeople criticize Frieren for looking so unemotional. The rest of her party support her, but Frieren feels uncertain. She starts to be critical of herself, and wonders if she should have spent more time learning more about her companions now that she feels the pain of them leaving. After expressing some regret for not spending more time with Himmel, she starts crying for the first time. Soon after the funeral, Heiter leaves to return to the holy city of Strahl, and he tells Frieren and Eisen he treasured his time adventuring with them. Frieren also leaves the city to continue to collect more spells. She asks if Eisen might join her this time, but the dwarf reveals that he has actually become too old for combat now, and he wishes her luck on her journey. 20 years pass, and Frieren makes her way to the holy city of Strahl to look for Heiter. She meets Fern, a young girl adopted by Heiter, who has now aged even more. Fern is a war orphan from the southern lands, and Frieren is surprised that the elderly Heiter has taken her in. Frieren expresses her desire to repay him in some way for traveling with her. Heiter asks if it would be possible if Frieren could take Fern, who has some ability in magic, as an apprentice. But Frieren refuses, because apprentice mages often do not last long and she could be killed during Frieren's travels. Later, Heiter shows Frieren an ancient grimoire that could hold the key to eternal life. His request is that Frieren help him study and translate the ancient text, and perhaps find a way to extend his life a little longer so he can spend more time with Fern. Frieren is skeptical, but agrees. Meanwhile, Heiter suggests, while Frieren is studying the text, she could teach Fern a little magic on the side. Frieren finds Fern studying a boulder trying to knock it over with magic, since Heiter told her she will become a true mage if she knocks it over successfully. The elf is surprised to find that Fern actually has great potential for magic, but that Fern herself is not that enthusiastic about magic in general. Still, Frieren agrees to start teaching Fern the basics, and she starts giving Fern lessons on how to control and feel her magic. But since it will take years to master magic, Frieren reminds Fern to be patient above all else. Months pass as Frieren stays with Heiter and Fern to study the grimoire. Soon the months turn into years, and Fern has made almost a decade in progress in magic, although Frieren is no closer to understanding the grimoire. One night Heiter collapses, so Frieren goes to find Fern so she can help take care of him. Fern is trying to knock over the boulder to become a true mage, and she refuses to stop training, because she is worried that she won't be able to knock over the boulder, and therefore become a true mage in time before Heiter dies. Years ago, when Fern was a young child, Heiter found her ready to give up, and he persuaded her to live by telling her stories of Himmel, his hero friend who always helped others in need. Heiter told Fern that he treasured his time with Himmel, and that she in turn should live to treasure her memories of her lost family. After Heiter takes her in, Fern started to learn magic not to become powerful, but to find a way to repay Heiter for taking care of her, and she wants to become a true mage to thank him for his kindness. Frieren agrees to help her by taking care of Heiter and working on the grimoire. Meanwhile, Fern works tirelessly to master her magical lessons from Frieren and accelerate her training. Months pass, and Frieren reveals that unfortunately she could not decipher the grimoire to extend his life. But Heiter doesn't care about the grimoire, and he only asks if Fern is strong enough to travel with Frieren to become her true apprentice. Frieren realizes that she was tricked by Heiter, who actually used the grimoire as an excuse to have Frieren train Fern in magic. Heiter feels his life is already complete, and he wants Fern to travel with Frieren so that she would not feel the pain over losing another loved one. Frieren starts to cry, imploring Heiter to make more memories with Fern, but Heiter is accepting of his death. When Frieren asks why he chose Fern, he reveals that it would have been what Himmel would have done. Inspired, Frieren agrees to take Fern as her apprentice, and soon after Heiter peacefully passes. Days later, Fern starts adventuring with Frieren, but she's a little confused since Frieren collects seemingly useless spells, such as a spell to make grapes sour. In their travels, they meet an herbalist to learn about rare plants when she shows them an old statue of Himmel the hero. The herbalist takes care of the statue since the other villagers have largely forgotten about him. She never stopped taking care of his statue, because many years ago Himmel saved her from an attack. Frieren recalls that Himmel was actually quite vain, and that he spent 18 hours posing for the statue. After she helps clean up the statue using a rust cleaning spell, she agrees to help grow flowers around the statue. Frieren decides to use magic to grow blue moon wheat flowers, since they used to grow around Himmel's hometown. She borrows a book from the herbalist because she had never seen the flowers, and only heard about them through Himmel. Since she can't conjure flowers she has never seen, she decides to leave, until Fern inspires her to stay a little while in the village, to track down some blue moon flowers from the surrounding countryside. The two of them spend weeks in the village, where Fern discovers other parts of Frieren's personality, such as her lazy side. Unfortunately, after 6 months, they are unsuccessful. Fern speaks with the herbalist, and she's worried that Frieren's obsession over the flowers keeps her away from more important things, and that she shouldn't spend so much time looking for something that might not exist. The herbalist reminds Fern that Frieren likely sees time much differently than them, and that Fern should communicate her worries honestly to Frieren. Fern is given seeds from the herbalist, and she asks Frieren if they could use those seeds instead. Frieren apologizes for keeping them in the village, and tells her they will be leaving soon. Eventually, they track down a seed squirrel in the hopes of it leading them to the blue moon flowers. While traveling, Fern asks Frieren why she collects spells, and the elf responds it's just a hobby for her. What she doesn't reveal is that Frieren often used spells in the service of others, even if it was just for simple and happy things. Decades ago, Frieren grew flowers for her party, and the hero told her about the blue moon flowers from his hometown, and that one day he will show them to her. In the present, Frieren is able to track down the squirrel, and find some of the blue moon flowers in a lost tower, and she feels some peace for finally seeing them for the first time, even if she is decades late. Fern arrives, and Frieren asks her why she also chose to learn magic. Fern tells her that it could have been anything and she just wanted to support herself, not quite willing to share yet that she learned magic because of her bond with Heiter. Later, Frieren conjures the field of flowers for the Himmel statue, and after crowning it in flowers they leave the village. 3 years later, Frieren and Fern are in the port city of Worm. Fern has started to learn more about Frieren, and her oddities as the years have passed, and she can tell that Frieren is hiding something from her in this city. When they separate to get surprised, Fern decides to spy on Frieren and track her movements, and she's surprised to find the elf looking troubled buying some merchandise. Eventually, Frieren decides to buy something before making her way into a tavern full of seemingly dangerous people. Frieren asks the tough-looking patrons of the tavern where she might be able to find some sweets, and she gets some advice from them, although Fern is intimidated by the atmosphere. When they meet up again, Frieren takes Fern to a fancy restaurant overlooking the shore, recommended by the adventurers in the tavern, and Fern feels a bit bad for spying on her. The desserts at the restaurant remind Frieren of a time when Himmel and the party told her about their favorite food after Himmel discovered her favorite food was pudding, years after they had already traveled together. Frieren also wants to know what Fern's favorite food is, and the elf gives Fern a hair ornament for her birthday. Fern feels happy that Frieren wants to know more about her, and recognizes that as an elf Frieren struggles to connect with others. Later, Fern asks Frieren what her goal is now. Frieren wants to collect spells, but she also wants to retrace her travels with Himmel and his party to see the traces of their adventures before too much time passes. Meanwhile, Frieren continues to train Fern more magic, and she starts to demonstrate more dangerous combat magic that quickly exhausts Fern. Since defensive magic is taxing on the user, Frieren tells Fern to concentrate on protecting smaller areas to maximize her impact. Eventually, the two of them make their way to a remote village where she becomes recognized by a villager. He takes her to the Seal of Qual, the Elder Sage of Corruption, a demon that Himmel and his party, including Frieren, had defeated nearly 80 years ago and sealed. Frieren has returned to defeat the demon again since the seal will break soon, but she is surprised that the villagers know about the seal. They reveal that when Himmel was alive, he traveled to the village every year to check on the condition of the seal, but was confident that Frieren would return in time to defeat Qual again. After inspecting the seal, Frieren tells the others she will break it on purpose to reseal him the next day. Fern is worried but is confident in Frieren's abilities, but Frieren reveals that Qual is a dangerous opponent, and she would not have beaten him without Himmel and the others in the past. This is because Qual is an exceptional mage and had developed dangerous magic-piercing magic. But Frieren tells her that this also led to his downfall. The next day Frieren frees Qual, who announces his intention to avenge the defeated demon lord. Though when he uses his piercing spell, it is blocked easily by Fern's defensive spell. Qual is impressed by Fern's power, but Frieren reveals that in the decades since Qual's defeat his specialty piercing magic was studied and adopted by humans. Now it has become part of ordinary magic education, and humans have developed systems to counter it. Qual refuses to accept defeat, and he initiates battle, but Fern continues to block his magic. Eventually, Frieren defeats Qual ironically using his own piercing spell against him. Later they return to the village, and Frieren recognizes the villager's hat from when he was a young boy. As they leave, Fern remarks that although the villagers held their faith in Himmel who visited them every year, the hero in turn had faith in Frieren that she would do the right thing long after he died. 1 year later, Frieren and Fern travel to a coastal town where the beaches have been plagued by old shipwrecked ships. In exchange for a spellbook written by Flem the legendary mage, Frieren agrees to clean up the beach, but Fern quickly sees that the book is actually a fake imitation of Flem's work. Frieren reveals that she doesn't care, and that she just took the job for her own reasons. Fern wonders how long they will stay in the town this time, and 3 months later the two mages are still in the town. Fern often has to take care of Frieren in the mornings, because the elf has trouble taking care of herself in the cold. Later, when they are using magic to repair the beach, Fern asks Frieren if she is secretly a hopeless person because she always wakes up at noon, and has to be taken care of. Fern wonders how Himmel's party dealt with it, and Frieren tells her that she usually just overslept all the time. Later, the town elder asks if Frieren will stay for the New Year's festival after the job, and they hope that she will be able to clean up the beach in time for the festival. Fern suspects that the festival is the reason why Frieren is taking the job, but she helps the elf anyway, and the two of them eventually complete the work to clear up the beach. As tradition for the town, they prepare to wake up early for the sunrise, which is tradition for the festival. Frieren doesn't care much for sunrises, but she remembered decades ago her party was disappointed she didn't join them to see the sunrise with the rest of the party. In the present day, Fern wakes up a sleepy Frieren in time so she won't miss the sunrise. Frieren still doesn't think the sunrise is worth waking up early, but she sees that Fern is enjoying it very much. Later, Frieren thinks about a time where Eisen constructed shrines to his fallen family. Eisen had different beliefs from Heiter on the topic of the afterlife, and Frieren reminded them that current magic cannot detect any afterlife. But Heiter tells them that he doesn't care if there isn't evidence, and that he prefers to believe that those who pass will have a good heaven waiting for them. In the present day, Eisen is praying at the same spot when Frieren and Fern arrive. It has been 30 years since they last met, and Frieren asks if Eisen would like any help with anything. He reveals that Heiter wrote to him often, and that he still has a few years left in him anyway. He decides to lead them on a small adventure, following a lead he got from Heiter on the whereabouts of Flem the legendary's last notes. Frieren decides to search for the notes, but she wants to act quickly and not waste too much of Fern's time, and Eisen feels she has changed slightly. Months pass as the three of them search through the forests for the notes, and eventually Fern finds a lead in the forest. Meanwhile, Frieren asks why Eisen is searching for the notes, and Eisen reveals that after Frieren cried during Himmel's funeral, and said she wished she knew Himmel better, Eisen decided to look for Flem's notes. Flem supposedly did some research on spells to talk with the dead, and he hoped to give Frieren the opportunity to talk to Himmel one last time. Frieren was actually a student of Flem over 1,000 years ago. Since she knew that her student would outlive her by many years, Flem actually prepared some spells for Frieren to speak to the dead in case Frieren may need them someday. In the present day, the party arrives at Flem's spell book, and Fern is shocked when Eisen tells her that Frieren used to be Flem's student. In Flem's book, she writes about reaching a heaven-like place called Oriel where she was able to conduct research and talk with her long-dead friends. Flem states in her book that to reach Oriel they would need to go to End, the very north of the continent, and where the previous Demon King's castle used to be. Eisen decides to use the favor owed to him, and he implores Frieren to make the trip to Oriel to see Himmel one last time. The three of them head back, and Fern is worried about the trip due to the dangers that might still be lingering in End. When Frieren falls asleep on the way back, Eisen uses the opportunity to ask Fern if she likes being Frieren's apprentice. Fern is still uncertain, but she thinks that Frieren is slowly opening up to her. Eisen sees this as a good development, because when he was adventuring with her, Frieren used to say that traveling with others was a waste of time, and she used to point out their adventures together were not even 1/100th of her entire life. Finally, they say goodbye to Eisen, who tells them he is too old to travel now. He warns Fern that the journey will be long, as it took Himmel and his party 10 long years to get to End to defeat the Demon King, and Fern realizes that she and Frieren will be retracing the hero's steps on their own 10-year journey. And this is all for this video. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.